Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to my November reading wrap-up. I didn't really hardcore participate in Nonfiction November. I never do. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, and I can't do a lot in a row. But I did manage to read 2 nonfiction books as well as 4 or 5, you can count for me, while we go through this fiction book, so let me talk to you about them. This is the first Bernice L. McFadden book that I have picked up and read. This is Gathering of Waters. McFadden is a fairly famous contemporary Black author. I know about her book Sugar and also the Book of Harlan, but this managed to catch my eye, and I was purchasing another book from Akashic Books, who publishes Gathering of Waters, so I decided to just buy it. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and most of my lack of awesome enjoyment of this comes from the fact that I didn't realize this book was based on true events and in essence was trying to explain the horrific murder of Emmett Till, who in 1955 was a 14-year-old who was kidnapped and mutilated and murdered by a couple of white men because he whistled at a white woman. The blurb of this says that, Tess is in love with Emmett Till and then he's murdered. She marries a man to escape from Money, Mississippi, where this horrific event happened, and then when she comes back, his ghost starts talking to her. That's the blurb. That was the story I was expecting, but instead what you get here is an explanation of the evil that led up to the murder of Emmett Till. And I think that this blurb kind of does this book an injustice because I had the wrong expectations of what I was going to find in here. However, what you can expect in here is some really lovely writing, a lot of sex, but not graphically told. This was also a relative breeze to get through, not subject matter wise, but pacing wise, in contrast to all of the Victorian literature I was reading in October. I liked the conversations of souls and ghosts, but don't read the blurb and expect that that's what you're going to get in here. Most of this story takes place years and years and years and years before Emmett Till's death. So I'm looking forward to trying more by Bernice L. McFadden in the future. This was a good starting point, but not quite what I was expecting. The Inconvenient Indian, a curious account of Native people in North America by Thomas King, has been highly recommended on BookTube, specifically by Mercedes of Mercy's Bookish Musings. So I came into this with some pretty high expectations. Also, I read the introduction of this from a library copy before deciding I wanted my own, and the introduction was also funny, engaging, easy to read. However, I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars as well because the tone of this book shifts to being a little bit angry in an off-putting sort of sense. I totally recognize that my white privilege has no place telling people of minorities not to be angry about things. It's totally their right, and it totally is an angry, shitty situation that continues to happen today, how the Native peoples are treated by Canada and America, with nonfiction that is aimed at the majority to educate them about minority groups and the injustice that majority groups do to minority groups. The majority can easily get defensive if the book starts kind of pointing fingers. I don't think that this book was necessarily pointing fingers, but I think that King had so much emotion behind what he was writing that it was hard to pull away from it. I found that there was an awful lot of information packed in this relatively small and readable book, to the point where I'm still kind of hazy on the facts of how I can talk about the injustice that is done to Native peoples in North America. And one of the things that I really like when I'm reading books about disadvantaged people, because the majority is just an asshole about it, I want facts so that I can talk to friends or family members who don't know what's going on, don't understand the implications of the injustice, to be able to tell them, like, no, this is actually what happens. Like, I have statistics, this is what's going on. And I found that walking away from this book, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of those tools and that specific information to educate people further. So that was a little bit of a bummer for me. Overall, this was educational and enlightening and easy to read, not subject matter-wise, but writing style-wise. So if you're interested in The Inconvenient Indian, I recommend you pick it up. However, I recommend you going and not expecting a perfect, enlightening book. Acacia Ives and I attempted to read The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell, but I ended up DNFing this at page 113 or something like that. Let me check. Oh, page 161, I DNF'd this, and I believe I gave it 2 out of 5 stars for the DNF because I didn't hate it, but the problem with this is that I picked this up with as much excitement to read a nonfiction by Elizabeth Gaskell as to read a book about Charlotte Bronte and her life, but unfortunately, Elizabeth Gaskell as an amazing writer is really not present in here. This is more a collection of fragments of letters written by Charlotte Bronte that Elizabeth Gaskell pieces together to inform the reader about Bronte's life. Had I known that, I don't think I would have picked this up because I was interested in hearing Elizabeth Gaskell tell me about her friend and fellow author, not reading the letters of Charlotte Bronte. So Acacia and I were slogging through this, getting tiny bits of impactful information out of these pages, but we both felt that at the time we were reading this, it was just something that we were doing because we had to do it, not because we were getting something out of it, which is frankly just a waste of time. I may pick this up in the future knowing what it is, but I think Acacia and I both agree that if we want to read about Charlotte Bronte or the Brontes in general, that there may be more narrative style biographies by other people to pick up rather than collections of letter fragments. So this was a huge disappointment for me, but I think I'm over it. I think it'll be okay. Then there was this complete and utter perfection of a surprise called Other Wordly Words Both Strange and Lovely from Around the World. This is written or collected by Yi Loom Mak and illustrated by Kelsey Garrity Riley. I was at a museum that is not too far from my house and in the gift shop, which is like the best gift shop ever. They had this, which is very reminiscent of the famously overhyped on BookTube Lost in Translation, which I read a few years ago and was very unimpressed with. This is a collection of illustrated words and their definitions from different cultures that mean complicated and interesting things. For example, so this is one of my absolute favorite spreads in this book, but it says, Brontide is a noun from the English language meaning the low rumble as of distant thunder. So all sorts of fancy pants words like that no one maybe hears nowadays, but are still words in the English or otherwise language that mean very many beautiful things. The reason why I could not leave the gift shop without this book because my friends suggested that I just read it there, because I was like, I don't know if I'll ever read this again. The illustrations are so introverted and calm and quiet and lovely that I just got such peace from looking at so many of these illustrations that I couldn't leave this. So let me flash you some of those illustrations. So as maybe you can tell, this book is really, really lovely, and I also loved that a lot of the words in here were words that somehow reminded me of being an introvert or hygge or just being comfy and cozy. So this was just a peaceful little gem of a book, and if you are interested in odd words that mean beautiful things with beautiful watercolor illustrations, this needs to go on your winter holiday wish list. I also reread my favorite book of all time, East of Eden by John Steinbeck this month. I decided that my copy of East of Eden needed to come with me to Salinas Valley when I was visiting BookTube friends up in that area, and I even was able to get it stamped, so it hung out with its dad for a while. So this reread of East of Eden was very enjoyable. It felt like coming back to something very familiar. I think that there were only a couple instances in here where I was really gut punched by Steinbeck's awesome writing, simply because it wasn't as much of a discovery for me this second read around. I do think that I kind of read this too soon after my initial reading. This was about a year and a half roughly since I read it the first time that I reread it. So I recommend that if you are planning on rereading East of Eden, which you loved the first time, you give it a little bit more breathing room. I do think too that I remembered perhaps too much of the characters' journeys. Knowing where they were going, where they were heading, wasn't as impactful of an experience for me. However, I still really loved this, and I still see how incredibly masterful this is of a work and of John Steinbeck, and it was really lovely visiting an old friend and picking up on things I hadn't seen before and enjoying characters I hadn't thoroughly enjoyed before. Those being Lee and Abra. They were probably my favorites in this reading experience, whereas in my first reading experience, my favorites were, I think, Tom and Samuel, and I think that was it. In this reading experience, I also had a lot less empathy for Aaron, who's a buttface. He reminds me of St. John Rivers in Jane Eyre, and it's just like, go away, shut up, go away. But anyway, so reread East of Eden. I still highly, highly recommend and love this book. If you haven't read East of Eden yet or given it a try, please do. In November, I also finally finished reading, or in my case, listening to the audiobook of Our Mutual Friend, narrated by David Timson. I love that audiobook narrator so much. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars because with Dickens, well, let's just say that I don't think I'm going to be reading a book over so long a period of time again. I found that for me, it seems that when I read a book and it takes me a longer time to do so, for whatever reason, whether intentional or no, my mind plays tricks on me and makes me think that it's because I'm not enjoying it rather than because I've chosen to take my time. So that's just a weird Amanda thing. But also, this book has to do with the themes of money and class primarily, and those themes just don't interest me as much as, say, gender, which you can find in Dickens' Dombey and Son, which is pretty much the same chunker of a book. I also think that I didn't get a chance to really interact with the characters thoroughly enough because I was just getting snippets of them over the course of a year and a half for me to feel connected to really any of them. So in essence, Our Mutual Friend, I almost haven't read it at this point. I haven't really experienced the story the way I would like to experience it, even though now I know what's going to be happening. So I look forward to rereading this in the future at a much faster pace than 18 months and seeing what my feelings really are on this one. But it was a fun experience doing the Dickens along with Katie from Books and Things, and I very, very much look forward to hearing her thoughts on the final chapters in this, which I haven't seen the video of yet, and also to hear her thoughts on how she experienced the serialized reading. The final book that I picked up this month was a very impromptu read, and it was A Rather Haunted Life, a biography of Shirley Jackson by Ruth Franklin, I believe. I found the audiobook on Hoopla, so decided to do it because Acacia Ives was raving about this biography and how it completely changed her mind about Shirley Jackson and made her want to read every single thing that Shirley Jackson has ever put down on paper. Now, this was a biography that was really working for me in contrast to The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Gaskell. This travels chronologically through Shirley Jackson's life. It also looks at the different works that she created through her life and ties it in with themes per chapter. And I found that that was just such a engaging and thematic reading experience. It was really fun to listen to it. This book does spoil like all of her major works, and I found that some of it was unnecessary, like the endings. You didn't really need to tell me what happened at the end. You could just talk to me about the themes that connected this book to Shirley Jackson's life at the time, but I'm definitely not sorry that I read this biography before reading any of Shirley Jackson's work, because this biography made me really want to prioritize reading something by Jackson in the new year. So if you are at all interested in Shirley Jackson and you don't mind being spoiled on her works, I highly, highly recommend A Rather Haunted Life. I think I gave it 4 stars. So those were all of the books that I read in November. November felt kind of like a slumpy month for me, but I am already reading things in December that are making me more excited, so hopefully that trend continues. Please let me know the best thing that you read in November, and until next time, continue to be lovely.